The fight practice ended with Commander Zarek standing over 3 sleeping human soldiers. She was barely breathing hard even though she had fought many enemies wearing full battle gear. Sergeant Alex Rodriguez watched from the medical area as she helped her beaten practice partners stand up. She moved like someone who had been taking it easy the whole time. "Your people show good never-give-up spirit," she said, giving water packs to soldiers who looked like a big truck had hit them. But never giving up without being strong enough creates weak spots that better enemies would use against you. Alex held back his first thought while checking the soldiers for hurts that went deeper than hurt feelings. Commander Zarek had spent 3 weeks making similar comments about human fighting abilities. Each comment sounded professional but always made them feel less confident by showing how much better the Zephyrians were. Medical check done, Alex told the exercise leaders. "No injuries that need long care. I suggest normal rest time before next training round." "Good work noted, Corpsman Rodriguez," Zarek said with approval that somehow felt more insulting than direct criticism. "Human medical rules work well to make up for your people's physical limits." "Our medical rules save lives," Alex replied calmly, packing equipment with movements that showed long practice at staying professional when things got tough. "That seems more important than showing who's physically stronger. Saving lives becomes pointless when not being physically ready causes deaths that could have been stopped," she argued back, cleaning her practice weapons with the careful attention that Zephyrian warriors gave to their gear. "Your soldiers train to stay alive. Mine train to win. The difference isn't just about ideas." Zephyrian military culture focused on individual fighting excellence and victory through being better, while human rules focused on team unity, flexible tactics, and reaching goals with few deaths. Both ways had worked well in their own situations, but joint training showed basic problems in military thinking. "Winning and staying alive don't have to be opposite things," Alex pointed out, watching human soldiers recover with the toughness that came from training designed to push them past normal limits. "Sometimes the best victory is bringing everyone home alive." "A nice thought," Zarek agreed with a tone that suggested she was humoring a child's simple view of the world. "Less nice when enemy forces don't share your worry about keeping weak links in the tactical chain safe." Alex found himself studying the Zephyrian commander with professional interest that went beyond their different philosophies. She was impressive by any fair measure 6 feet of perfectly trained warrior whose fighting skills made her human counterparts look like eager beginners. Her people had grown up on a high-gravity world where staying alive required physical abilities that exceeded human norms, creating natural advantages that training could improve but never fully overcome. "Commander," he said, truly curious about her view, "do you believe humans can work well in actual combat situations? Or are we just pretending to have a military alliance for political reasons?" Zarek paused in her equipment care, thinking about the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Your people show skill in scenarios that focus on technology and having more numbers. But real warfare often requires individual ability under conditions where mechanical aids become unavailable. Combat scenarios where equipment failure or enemy action removes technological support. Situations requiring physical endurance beyond your people's normal limits." She listed the challenges with clinical precision. Zephyrian warriors train to work independently under such conditions. Human soldiers depend on systems that can fail. Alex nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the truth of her concerns, even while disagreeing with her conclusions. Systems can fail, but humans excel at adapting when systems fail, making up solutions under pressure and supporting each other through difficulties that would overwhelm individuals. Adaptation becomes pointless when basic physical requirements exceed your people's capabilities, she replied with certainty that suggested the discussion was reaching its logical end. Courage and cleverness cannot replace adequate strength and endurance. The training exercise controller announced the next scenario, A pretend patrol through hostile territory with objectives that would test both people's approaches to scouting and tactical planning. Alex gathered his medical equipment while wondering if Zarek would ever encounter a situation that challenged her assumptions about human capabilities. "Corpsman Rodriguez," she said as they prepared to join the mixed patrol unit. "I hope today's exercise provides opportunities for your soldiers to demonstrate the adaptability you claim. Real combat rarely accommodates species-specific limitations. I hope it provides opportunities for mutual understanding," Alex replied, though he suspected that understanding might require experiences that went beyond controlled training scenarios. The patrol formation included 6 human soldiers and 4 Zephyrian warriors, their different equipment and tactical approaches creating coordination challenges that joint training was supposed to resolve. Alex took his position as the unit's medical specialist while observing how each people interpreted their mission parameters. "Movement to contact in hostile territory," announced the exercise controller. "Unknown enemy strength and disposition. Rules of engagement. Neutralize threats and achieve reconnaissance objectives with minimal casualties." Commander Zarek moved with hunting efficiency that made the pretend mission feel genuinely dangerous, while human soldiers demonstrated the careful precision that came from training designed to minimize risk through thorough preparation and mutual support. "Stay close to your technology, humans," she whispered as they entered terrain that would test everyone's assumptions about military effectiveness. "You may need all the advantages you can get." Alex checked his medical supplies one final time, wondering if the day's exercise would finally provide the real-world experience that could bridge the gap between theoretical discussions and practical understanding of what each people could contribute to joint military operations. The first sign that their training exercise had become something more serious was the way Commander Zarek's entire posture changed when the shooting started. Her casual skill transformed into deadly focus as bullet weapons fire erupted from positions that weren't supposed to contain hostile forces, the kind of real combat that made training scenarios look like children's games. "Contact front," shouted Corporal Jenkins, diving for cover behind terrain features that offered protection from weapons fire that could actually kill rather than merely register scoring hits. "Multiple targets, unknown strength." Alex felt his training take over as adrenaline flooded his system, the clinical detachment of battlefield medicine replacing the theoretical concerns of exercise supervision. Real combat meant real injuries, and his job had just shifted from monitoring pretend casualties to keeping actual people alive under fire. "Medical station, rear center," he called out, establishing triage position while scanning the tactical situation for wounded personnel who would need immediate attention. "All units report casualties and medical status." Commander Zarek moved through the hostile fire with grace that defied human understanding of combat movement. Her warrior training allowed her to advance while bullets passed close enough to shred equipment but somehow missed her entirely. Alex watched her transition from training demonstration to combat effectiveness, understanding for the first time why Zephyrian forces dominated military conflicts throughout their sector. "Insurgent positions 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock, she reported through combat communications that remained steady despite the chaos around them. Estimated 12 to 15 hostiles with military-grade equipment. This is not a training scenario. The human soldiers adapted to real combat with the flexibility that their doctrine emphasized, establishing overlapping fields of fire and coordinated movement that compensated for individual limitations through collective tactical advantages. Alex felt pride in their performance even while processing the implications of genuine hostile contact during what should have been controlled exercises. "How did insurgents penetrate training area security?" demanded Lieutenant Morrison over the tactical network, his voice tight with the stress of commanding mixed human-alien forces under actual fire. "Analysis later, survival now," Zarek replied with practical focus that cut through unnecessary speculation. "Enemy forces are using training grounds as cover for smuggling operations. We interrupted something they couldn't afford to have discovered." Alex began moving between positions to check on personnel who'd taken cover, his medical training allowing him to assess injuries while remaining aware of tactical developments that could affect his ability to provide care. The difference between training wounds and combat trauma was already becoming apparent: stress responses, adrenaline effects, and psychological factors that simulation couldn't replicate. Minor shrapnel wounds on Garcia and Thompson, he reported after checking the forward positions. Nothing requiring immediate evacuation, but recommend monitoring for shock and blood loss. The firefight intensified as insurgent forces attempted to prevent the patrol from withdrawing to report their presence, creating a tactical situation where both people's military approaches would be tested under conditions that couldn't be controlled or predicted. Zephyrian warriors fought with individual excellence that allowed them to dominate local tactical situations, while human soldiers demonstrated unit cohesion that created tactical advantages through coordinated action. Alex found himself moving between both approaches, providing medical support that kept everyone functioning despite different responses to stress and injury. Commander Zarek is advancing on the 11 o'clock position, reported one of the Zephyrian warriors with approval that suggested this was typical behavior for their people. She will neutralize the threat through direct assault. Alex watched the commander move through hostile fire with confidence that bordered on recklessness. Her physical capabilities allowed tactical choices that would be suicidal for human soldiers. But even Zephyrian advantages had limits, and the insurgents had military-grade weapons designed to stop heavily armored opponents. The bullet hit Zarek's center mass just as she reached the enemy position. The kinetic impact sent her sprawling in a way that immediately told Alex something was seriously wrong. Zephyrian warriors could absorb damage that would disable humans, but her complete loss of coordination suggested injuries that went beyond surface trauma. "Commander down," he called out, already moving toward her position despite fire that made the approach extremely dangerous. "Cover fire requested for medical evacuation." "Negative on evacuation," came Zarek's voice through the comm system, though Alex could hear pain and confusion that she was struggling to suppress. "Continue mission. Zephyrian warriors do not require medical assistance from minor wounds." Alex reached her position and immediately saw that her assessment was dangerously wrong. The bullet had penetrated her armor at a point where Zephyrian physiology created vulnerability that human weapons designers probably didn't even know existed. Blood loss was massive and accelerating, while her enhanced cardiovascular system was going into shock patterns that standard Zephyrian field medicine wasn't equipped to handle. "Commander, with respect, you're bleeding out," Alex said, beginning emergency treatment while hostile fire continued around them. "Your cardiovascular architecture makes this wound potentially fatal without immediate intervention." "Impossible," she replied weakly, though her voice carried growing confusion as blood loss affected her cognitive function. "Zephyrian physiology is superior to human. Minor projectile wounds cannot cause significant trauma." Alex worked to stabilize her condition while explaining the medical reality that her culture hadn't prepared her to understand. "Your muscle density and cardiovascular efficiency create different trauma patterns than human wounds. What would be minor for my people is catastrophic for yours." For the first time since he'd known her, Commander Zarek was completely dependent on human expertise for survival, creating a role reversal that neither of them had anticipated during months of joint training where she'd consistently demonstrated superiority in every physical challenge. "Can you stabilize her condition for evacuation?" asked Lieutenant Morrison as human soldiers established defensive positions around Alex's impromptu medical station. "I can keep her alive if we can reach proper medical facilities," Alex replied, monitoring vital signs that showed dangerous instability. "But she needs treatment that field medicine can't provide." The tactical situation was deteriorating as insurgent forces maneuvered to prevent the patrol's withdrawal, creating circumstances where human and Zephyrian approaches to warfare would determine whether anyone survived to report the contact. The evacuation order came with tactical reality that made standard medical protocols impossible. Insurgent forces had positioned themselves to block any rescue attempt, while communication jamming prevented calling for air support that could extract casualties under fire. Alex found himself facing the choice between following doctrine that would ensure his own survival and staying with a patient who would die without continuous medical care. All units prepare for tactical withdrawal, Lieutenant Morrison announced over increasingly unreliable communications. Wounded personnel who cannot maintain pace will be recovered during follow-up operations. That means abandonment, Zarek said with bitter clarity, her consciousness flickering as blood loss affected cognitive function. Zephyrian doctrine. Wounded warriors who cannot keep pace become acceptable losses for unit survival. Alex continued emergency treatment while processing the implications of military protocols that prioritize tactical success over individual survival. Human doctrine doesn't work that way. We don't leave wounded personnel behind unless extraction is physically impossible. Your doctrine creates weakness that competent enemies exploit, she replied with fading strength, though her words carried more confusion than conviction. Sentiment compromises tactical effectiveness. Maybe, Alex said, adjusting pressure bandages that were the only thing preventing complete cardiovascular collapse. But sentiment also means no one dies alone. The remaining Zephyrian warriors approached Alex's position with expressions that suggested internal conflict between military training and personal loyalty. Commander Zarek was their respected leader, but she was also wounded beyond their ability to assist while maintaining unit effectiveness. Corpsman Rodriguez, said Subcommander Thector with formal courtesy that couldn't disguise his emotional distress. Can the commander be moved without causing additional trauma? Short distances, maybe. Long-range evacuation under fire would be fatal without proper stabilization equipment. Alex checked his medical supplies, calculating how long he could sustain her life using field treatment methods. She needs surgical intervention within 6 hours, or the internal bleeding will cause irreversible organ failure. Then the decision is clear, Zarek said with acceptance that chilled Alex despite her weakened condition. Tactical withdrawal preserves unit integrity. Individual sacrifice serves collective survival. The decision would be clear if I were Zephyrian, Alex replied, preparing equipment for an evacuation attempt that violated every tactical principle he'd been taught. But I'm human, which means I'm too weak to abandon wounded allies. The statement created silence among the Zephyrian warriors that suggested he'd challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between strength and military effectiveness. Zarek studied his face with growing confusion as she processed implications that her culture hadn't prepared her to understand. You would risk unit survival for one wounded individual? She asked with genuine puzzlement. Your tactical doctrine prioritizes sentiment over strategic necessity. My tactical doctrine prioritizes bringing everyone home alive, Alex corrected, rigging a field stretcher that would allow him to transport her while maintaining medical care. Strategic necessity includes maintaining unit cohesion through demonstrated loyalty to individual members. Lieutenant Morrison appeared at Alex's position with equipment that suggested he'd reached similar conclusions about evacuation priorities. Corpsman, what do you need for medical transport under fire? 6 hours to reach surgical facilities, portable life support to maintain her cardiovascular stability, and enough cover fire to move through hostile territory without taking additional casualties. Time frame is possible if we move fast and stay ahead of pursuit, Morrison replied, studying tactical maps that showed potential routes to friendly territory. Life support. Alex gestured to equipment he'd improvised from medical supplies and portable power units. Adequate for transport if we don't encounter delays or equipment failures. Cover fire will be provided by volunteers, Morrison announced to the mixed human-alien unit. Anyone who wants to follow standard evacuation protocols can withdraw with the main force. The response surprised everyone, including Alex. Every human soldier volunteered for the dangerous evacuation mission, while 3 of the 4 Zephyrian warriors chose to remain with their wounded commander despite doctrine that should have compelled them to prioritize unit survival over individual loyalty. This is tactically unsound, Zarek protested weakly as Alex prepared her for transport. Risk-benefit analysis does not support these decisions. Risk-benefit analysis doesn't account for everything that matters, Alex replied, lifting her onto the improvised stretcher with help from soldiers whose commitment to the mission couldn't be explained through conventional military logic. Sometimes effectiveness includes factors that can't be quantified. The evacuation began with movement techniques that emphasize stealth and endurance over speed and firepower, using human tactical approaches that relied on patience and careful planning rather than the direct confrontation methods that Zephyrian training emphasized. As they moved through hostile territory, Zarek experienced vulnerability and dependence that were completely outside her people's normal military experience. Her life depended entirely on humans whose capabilities she had consistently dismissed as inadequate for real warfare. Your endurance exceeds theoretical projections, she observed during a rest stop where Alex checked her medical status while the escort maintained perimeter security. Human soldiers should not be capable of sustained load-bearing over extended distances. We're capable of more than you think when the mission requires it, Alex replied, monitoring vital signs that showed gradual stabilization despite the stress of transport under combat conditions. Determination compensates for a lot of physical limitations. Determination is psychological rather than tactical, she argued with diminishing conviction. Emotional responses cannot substitute for adequate physical capability. Maybe not, Alex agreed, preparing for the next movement phase while calculating medical requirements for the remaining journey. But emotional responses can motivate physical capability that exceeds normal parameters. The conversation continued during their dangerous journey through enemy-controlled territory, creating the first genuine communication they'd shared since beginning joint training operations. Through pain and medical necessity, Zarek began to understand that human weakness often represented different approaches to survival rather than fundamental inadequacy. Hours of shared danger and mutual dependence created understanding that months of training exercises had failed to achieve, while Alex gained confidence in capabilities he hadn't realized he possessed until circumstances demanded their full expression. The final approach to friendly territory required 12 hours of movement through terrain that tested every assumption both peoples had made about military capability and tactical effectiveness. Alex carried Commander Zarek through hostile territory using human military doctrine that emphasized patience, stealth, and endurance over the direct confrontation tactics that Zephyrian training had conditioned her to expect from warriors. Your people's approach to warfare is more sophisticated than I had calculated, Zarek admitted during a concealment break where Alex checked her medical status while the escort team maintained security around their position. I had interpreted careful planning as evidence of physical inadequacy rather than recognizing it as tactical methodology. Different doesn't mean inferior, Alex replied, adjusting medical equipment that had kept her alive through conditions that would have overwhelmed standard Zephyrian field medicine. Both our peoples developed military approaches that work within our respective capabilities and cultural frameworks. Through their shared experience of vulnerability and mutual dependence, Zarek was discovering perspectives on warfare that her culture had never considered. Human soldiers weren't failed Zephyrian warriors. They were representatives of military philosophy that achieved different objectives through different methods. Your endurance under load exceeds Zephyrian projections for human capability, she observed, watching Alex maintain steady pace while carrying equipment and medical supplies that would have challenged soldiers twice his size. How do you sustain performance beyond your people's normal physical parameters? Training, determination, and knowing that lives depend on mission success, Alex explained, though the technical aspects were more complex than simple motivation. Human military conditioning focuses on extending performance under stress rather than maximizing capability under optimal conditions. The evacuation team moved through enemy patrols using tactical techniques that combined human stealth with Zephyrian reconnaissance skills, creating coordination that neither people could have achieved independently. Alex found himself learning from warriors whose individual capabilities exceeded human norms while they adapted to collective methods that multiplied effectiveness through mutual support. Corpsman Rodriguez, Sub-Commander Thector said during a communications check with their extraction point, "The medical care you have provided exceeds anything in Zephyrian field medicine protocols. How did humans develop techniques that we had not discovered?" "Different peoples develop different solutions to similar problems," Alex replied, monitoring Zericth's vital signs while calculating medication requirements for the remaining journey. "Your medicine focuses on enhancing natural healing abilities. Ours focuses on supporting damaged systems until they can recover." The conversation revealed cultural factors that had shaped their mutual misconceptions. Zephyrian military medicine assumed warrior physiology that could heal rapidly from most combat trauma, while human medical doctrine was designed for a people that required technological assistance to survive serious injuries. "I am beginning to understand that weakness and strength are contextual rather than absolute," Zericth said with growing clarity as her condition stabilized under Alex's care. "What I interpreted as human inadequacy was actually adaptation to different operational requirements. And what we interpreted as Zephyrian arrogance was actually confusion about how different peoples could function effectively in similar roles," Alex added, helping her process implications that challenged fundamental assumptions both cultures had made about military capability. The rescue came when Alex's emergency beacon finally reached friendly forces, but not before Zericth had experienced human courage operating according to principles her military training had never prepared her to recognize or value. The evacuation team had demonstrated tactical effectiveness that couldn't be explained through conventional analysis of physical capabilities or technological advantages. "Medical transport incoming," announced Lieutenant Morrison as aircraft approached their position with speed that suggested genuine emergency rather than routine casualty evacuation. Corpsman Rodriguez, medical status on primary patient. Stable for transport. Surgical intervention required within 2 hours, Alex reported, preparing Zericth for transfer to advanced medical facilities. Secondary medical issues include dehydration and exhaustion among escort personnel, but nothing requiring immediate attention. As medical teams took over her care, Zericth caught Alex's hand with strength that surprised everyone, including herself. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said with formal precision that carried emotional weight beyond military courtesy. "You have demonstrated that courage and capability exist in forms that my culture had not recognized. You've demonstrated that strength includes the wisdom to accept help when it's needed," Alex replied, understanding that their shared experience had transformed both their perspectives on what different peoples could accomplish together. The medical transport carried them toward facilities where Zephyrian and human medical teams would work together to complete her recovery. But the real healing had already begun during their journey through hostile territory, where mutual dependence had created mutual respect. 3 weeks later, Commander Zericth returned to duty with full medical clearance and formal commendation for bravery under fire. Her first official act was to request Alex's permanent assignment to Joint Operations Medical Support, a recommendation that carried significant weight within Zephyrian military hierarchy. The humans demonstrate tactical capabilities that complement rather than compete with Zephyrian military doctrine, she reported to the Joint Operations Command. Their approach to battlefield medicine, unit cohesion, and mission persistence creates force multiplication effects that enhance overall operational effectiveness. Alex found himself assigned to advanced joint training programs where human and Zephyrian military techniques were being integrated into new operational frameworks that acknowledged both people's contributions to collective defense initiatives. Sergeant Rodriguez, Zarek said during their first joint training session since the evacuation, I owe you an apology for misconceptions that nearly cost us both our lives. Your people are not weak. You are differently strong. Your people aren't arrogant. You're differently confident, Alex replied, watching human and Zephyrian soldiers work together with coordination that would have been impossible before their shared combat experience. Both approaches have value when properly integrated. Their partnership became a model for improved human-Zephyrian military cooperation, demonstrating that different peoples could enhance each other's capabilities when cultural assumptions were replaced by practical understanding of complementary strengths. The warrior who had once dismissed humans as fundamentally inadequate now served as advocate for integration programs that recognized different forms of courage as equally valuable in achieving military objectives that required both individual excellence and collective determination. And the medic who had once doubted his own capabilities in comparison to alien warriors had discovered that strength included the courage to risk everything for principles that transcended species boundaries, tactical doctrine, and conventional definitions of military effectiveness.